Hello everyone, welcome to my channel SW Metro official channel. Family member labels Robyn as nothing more than Kody's mistress. Robyn Brown by other family members as nothing more than Kody's mistress. This phrase, dripping with venom and theological weight, is not merely an insult hurled in the heat of an argument, it is a carefully chosen, devastating indictment that encapsulates the complete systemic failure of the family unit, the perceived perversion of its sacred covenants, and the ultimate weaponization of their shared faith to exile a member deemed an apostate to their original purpose. To understand the gravity of this label is to understand that in the context of their fundamentalist Mormon principles, a mistress represents the antithesis of a sister wife. It is the embodiment of selfishness, secrecy, and sin, standing in direct opposition to the purported values of selflessness, transparency, and divine order the family was built upon. The foundation of the Brown family's original plural marriage, between Kody, Mary, Janelle, and Christine, was, at least in its public presentation, built upon a specific religious framework. The principle of plural marriage, as they practiced it, was meant to be a difficult but righteous path to celestial glory, requiring immense sacrifice for the greater good of the entire family. The ideal of the sister wife was paramount: women who supported each other, shared resources, loved each other's children, and subverted their own jealousies for the unity of the whole. Their relationship with Kody, while individual, was supposed to exist within the container of the collective. The entrance of Robyn into the family, however, is viewed in retrospect by the other wives not as an expansion of this sacred unit but as its corruption. From the very beginning, Robyn and Kody's relationship operated under a different set of rules, breaking the very covenants of transparency and equity that were the bedrock of the original union. The infamous 11-day courtship engagement, the secret kissing before marriage, while Christine was in labor, no less, the creation of a legal marriage that stripped Mary of her status, and the disproportionate allocation of Kody's time and financial resources, all these actions painted a picture not of a spiritually sanctioned union but of a clandestine, passionate affair that was being awkwardly and painfully grafted onto an existing family. This perception is what fuels the mistress analogy. A mistress, by definition, exists outside the sanctioned bounds of a marriage, receiving preferential treatment, intimacy, and secrets at the expense of the legitimate spouse and family. For Christine, Janelle, and Mary, Robyn's experience mirrored this dynamic precisely. They watched as Kody built a life with Robyn that was separate and superior, a larger, more luxurious home, a more obedient and adoring relationship, and a clear priority in his affections and decisions. Kody's time, which was once a resource to be meticulously divided, became almost exclusively Robyn's. His emotional energy, once, theoretically, available to all, was now reserved for her and her children. The family's finances, a constant source of strain, seemed to consistently flow toward Robyn's needs and debts. In this context, Robyn was not experiencing the hardships of plural marriage, she was being insulated from them by a man who was, in effect, emotionally and financially abandoning his other families to be with her. She wasn't a sister wife weathering the same storm, she was in a separate, more comfortable boat, and Kody was rowing it for her alone. Furthermore, the label of mistress implies a level of manipulation and cunning that the other wives directly attribute to Robyn. In their narrative, she is not a passive recipient of Kody's favor but an active architect of her own primacy. They point to her role as a constant confidant and unofficial marriage counselor to Kody, a position that allowed her to influence his perceptions of and relationships with the other wives. Her frequent tears, interpreted by the others as a calculated performance to garner Kody's sympathy and deflect accountability, reinforced the idea of a woman using emotional manipulation to control a man, a classic trope of the other woman. The other wives felt they were not dealing with a peer seeking unity but with a rival who had successfully monopolized their shared husband, using his favor to create a hierarchy where she sat firmly at the top. A sister wife builds up the family, a mistress, in their view, dismantles it brick by brick, and from their perspective, Robyn's actions led directly to the alienation of Kody from his children and the eventual destruction of his marriages to Christine, Janelle, and Mary. Crucially, the accusation is not just about behavior, it is a theological condemnation. In their faith, a plural marriage is only celestial if it is built on righteousness and unity. By accusing Robyn of being a mistress, the other wives are effectively declaring her marriage to Kody spiritually illegitimate. They are arguing that because it was entered into and conducted through deceit, the broken promises of equity, selfishness, and the undermining of the other marriages, it does not serve the divine principle and therefore holds no celestial weight. It is a carnal marriage, not a celestial one. This transforms Robyn from a difficult sister wife into a corrupting influence, a sinner who has led Kody astray from his religious duties and fractured his eternal family. She becomes the serpent in their garden, the reason their path to heaven has been blocked. This religious dimension makes the label far more than a personal attack. It is an excommunication, a statement that she never was, and never could be, a true part of their sacred covenant. She was always an outsider operating by a different, worldly set of rules. Ultimately, the painful label of mistress applied to Robyn by her former sister wives is the culmination of years of perceived betrayal, neglect, and spiritual hypocrisy. It is the linguistic embodiment of their collective grief and rage. It reduces a complex, multi-year relationship to its most painful essence, not a divinely sanctioned union for the growth of a family, but a selfish, earthly affair that destroyed one. It represents the death of their dream of celestial glory and the shattering of their family identity. In calling Robyn Kody's mistress, they are not only vilifying her but also reframing their own story. They are no longer failed sister wives in a broken plural marriage, they are the wronged wives and children of a man who chose a mistress over his family, a narrative as old as time itself, and one that finally makes sense of their profound and public suffering. The sister wives world has never lacked for controversy, but one of the most explosive accusations to ever surface against Robyn Brown, Kody's last remaining wife, came when a family member allegedly described her as nothing more than Kody's mistress, a word choice that carries with it centuries of stigma and dismissiveness, a term that erases the supposed legitimacy of a marriage and instead paints the woman involved as a usurper, an outsider, and a schemer who weaponized intimacy and emotional connection to undermine the bonds of a larger family unit. And this accusation cuts to the heart of the long-running narrative that Robyn was never truly accepted by the other wives, that she was always viewed as a wedge between Kody and his original wives, and that rather than being a wife in the traditional sense of their polygamist faith, she has functioned as something more akin to an affair partner, a woman who monopolized Kody's time, affection, and attention at the expense of Mary, Janelle, and Christine, turning what was once a carefully balanced if fragile plural marriage into a one-man, one-woman union with 3 neglected partners left on the sidelines. And to understand the weight of this accusation we have to trace the history back to Robyn's entrance into the family in 2010, when she was introduced not only to Kody but to millions of TLC viewers as the pretty, younger, hopeful new addition to the Brown family, one who came with children from a previous marriage and a reputation for being soft-spoken, spiritual, and devoted, yet whose arrival was immediately met with tension, as Christine infamously admitted to sobbing at the thought of Kody courting another woman. Mary wrestled with the insecurity of no longer being the first wife in the spotlight, and Janelle, the most pragmatic, worried about finances and logistics, but what soon became obvious was that Kody's infatuation with Robyn was deeper, more intense, and far more consuming than what he showed his other wives, with cameras capturing him literally running to meet her, doting on her children, offering her legal marriage after divorcing Mary, and ultimately building a home with her in Flagstaff that dwarfed what the other wives had. And while polygamy has always operated with a sense of rotation and fairness, the husband visiting each wife in turn, dividing time with precision, the balance crumbled almost instantly, leaving the other wives to question if Robyn had been elevated into a unique category of wifehood that was indistinguishable from monogamy. And over time, family members themselves began to voice what viewers could already see, that Robyn wasn't just the favorite, she was treated like the only wife who mattered, with Kody even stating on camera that he and Robyn were soulmates, an admission that hurt the other women deeply because it implied that their marriages lacked the same bond. And when the pandemic struck, Kody's favoritism became glaring, as he spent nearly all his time at Robyn's home, enforcing rigid rules on Janelle and Christine's households, and leaving Mary completely abandoned, to the point where Christine said she could no longer accept a life where her husband was openly choosing another woman every day, and so the cracks became earthquakes, leading Christine to leave, then Janelle, and eventually Mary too, until the only person left standing by Kody's side was Robyn, which seemed to vindicate the long-held suspicion that she wasn't just the fourth wife but the endgame, the woman who positioned herself strategically, emotionally, and spiritually to become the sole partner in Kody's life. And when family insiders allegedly began using the word mistress to describe her, it revealed a raw resentment simmering beneath the surface, because that term doesn't only mean lover, it means someone who took what didn't belong to her, someone who was never supposed to occupy the place of a legitimate wife, but who did so anyway by seduction, patience, and perhaps manipulation. And it reframes Robyn's entire journey not as the story of a woman who innocently wanted love but as a calculated play that dismantled decades of sister-wife cooperation, especially when you consider the timeline of Mary's legal divorce from Kody, which he framed as a sacrifice to allow him to adopt Robyn's children, but which Mary later admitted left her devastated and discarded, fueling the belief that Robyn orchestrated that arrangement not only to secure her kids' stability but to cement her position as the legal, rightful spouse. And in that moment, critics argue, she shifted from being wife number 4 to the one true wife, making the others obsolete. And while some fans defend Robyn as simply following her heart, others argue that she leaned into her role as the favored partner,